my plan was to do a whole area of bananas this year, like over 100 bananas or more. And I grew them. I didn't have the patience to wait to sow the seed until spring, and I sowed it all in the autumn. They all came up, and I spent weeks showing off on the internet, and then they all died. With the snowdrops, I always kind of said, well, I'm not really a galanthophile, but I am.
You see, I envy you because you can grow those over in Ireland because you have a higher rainfall than we do.
And then I look at your container planting, and I look at your tropicals and the dry garden, and I'm like, oh, I want that.
Hello and welcome to episode 29 of Talking Dirty. Over at East Ruston Old Vicarage, all snuggled up on a rather dull, dank day, is Alan Edward Herbert Gray, our happy and very handsome horticulturalist.
We're in a rainy old piece of Norfolk today, but over there in Cambridgeshire, where the sun was shining a little while ago, I hope that it still is, we have Thordis Maria Sophia Fridriksson looking vibrant in this lovely bright red, which is cheering up my day no end because it is a dull old day here. We've still got a little bit of drizzle outside, but it's supposed to brighten up. In fact, it actually has already, because we have a very special guest today, don't we?
We do, who's also bathed in sunshine, Ben Preston, or I think we possibly renamed him on the last appearance on the podcast, Ben Bonnie Preston, a head gardener at Yorkgate. Can you believe it? 3 months since we last caught up with you, Ben.
I know, yeah. It's been a busy 3 months, but yeah, we've had a lot of snow since we've last spoken to you. In fact, that's why my face is glowing white this morning. Is that we've had 4 inches of snow last night, and it's so white outside and bright that it's reflecting in the window and brightening me up. But yeah, it's great. We've got a lot of work done, but we've been incredibly wet. We've had a lot of snow, but we've managed to get a lot done, and fingers crossed we'll be ready and raring for April if we're allowed. So yeah, it's God knows where we're going to go from here, but who knows? 4 inches of snow. If it disappears by the end of the week, I'll be happy. We've got some photographers coming in next week to take a couple of pictures of the snowdrops, which I'm sure we'll talk about. We usually have our annual snowdrop week, sort of second, third week in February, and we can't open for obvious reasons. But I've got a few snowdrops. I bought a few snowdrops recently that we'll chat about as well. But a few guilty pleasures. I bought one on eBay the other night for the first time, which I think is a very slippery slope.
Yes, very slippery indeed. That's how you end up losing hundreds of pounds.
We were having a podcast the other day, and a friend of mine, this is a radio program. A friend of mine, Brian, he actually winged me over a photograph of this snowdrop, which has lemon stems, a golden ovary, and golden marks, daubs on the outside of the petals. And I said, gosh, that's really nice. And then I started talking about the most expensive snowdrop that had ever been sold, which I think was Golden Fleece, and it sold for something like 1,300 and something pounds a bulb.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I said, what's the name of your snowdrop? In between radio, I was emailing on my computer, you see, and he said, that's Golden Fleece. And I'd already said to him, have you got some to spare at the end of the season? Because he divides and sells them, you see. And so he said, yes. And I thought, well, I better have my piggy bank. He said, yeah, can you open the gold one?
Well, interestingly, so I am very good friends with a lady called Anne Wright. And Anne Wright she owns Dryad Nurseries. And she's famed for miniature daffodils and the snowdrops. And she's bred 5 of the most expensive snowdrops ever bred, which just behind Golden Fleece is the gold range, the Dryad gold range. And they're absolutely magnificent. And she's also bred some amazing inverse peculiariform ones that she's just released, Venus, Demeter, and Artemis. But
do you think wait a minute, Ben? Do you think for all those people out there that are sort of probably not au fait with all our terminologies and everything, we ought to perhaps explain what peculiariform means?
Absolutely. And actually, it links me to my first eBay purchase, which was a peculiariform. So for those, I'm going to keep it fairly simple. The standard Galanthus nivalis, the snowdrop that we all know, is got 3 outer, they're actually tepals, we'll call them petals, 3 outer petals and 3 inner petals. And the 3 outer petals are generally longer. So when you look at a snowdrop, you think of it in three larger petals and then 3 inners, which has got the green marking on. So peculiariform is actually when all the inners and the outers are the same length. So you have 6 petals that are all the same length. and I bought one called Don Armstrong the other night, which was bred in Canada. So it's a pure white snowdrop that's got 6 petals that are all of the same length. Inverse peculiiform is when the inners, which possess the green markings, appear on the outside. So the outers are bigger than the inners, or they're all equal size. And that's when you see these lovely snowdrops that have got that. If you think of some of you'll know Mr. Grumpy, which is a famous snowdrop, which has got the grumpy face on the inner of the snowdrop. So their markings are typical of the inner. So when you get them on the outside, which are bigger, that's the inverse peculiiform. So hopefully that dispels a few myths about peculiiform and inverse peculiiform. Is that about right?
Yeah, you're perfectly right. On the money, Ben.
Well, literally on the money if you've just been buying lots of snowdrops.
Yes, it wasn't terribly expensive, but it was. I bought it off a friend of mine, but really, I mean, I think people say, "Oh, why would you spend that much on a snowdrop?" But I mean, why would you spend that much on a pair of shoes, a handbag, a tree for the garden, a car? I mean, it's each their own, and you know, they're such a bringer of joy at this time of year. They're really the highlight of the gardening. You know, the start of the highlight of the gardening year. And why not get excited about a little plant?
And an extra plus point, Ben. An extra plus point is the fact that if you spend £100 on a snowdrop bulb, and I remember doing this with green tear,
which is a lovely snowdrop,
now maybe more, which is a very expensive snowdrop, green on the outers, which is a lovely thing to have. Although I have to say, it doesn't show up well in the garden. It's a demure little thing. I mean, you have to look for it, but then it increases like 1-0. And that's the great thing. So you probably find that Golden Fleece, if you bought it for 1,300 and whatever it was, today it's much, much cheaper because lots of people will have had a bulb or two and they will have bulked it up. And so therefore, you know, supply and demand dictates that it becomes less expensive.
Absolutely. And we actually, and it's something I teach my trainees at Yorkgate is, and my friend Dan taught me how to chip, and the way that she's perfected. Yeah. So chipping or twin skin, as it's called with daffodils, is when you've got the best way to describe it is if you've got an onion, when you've got all your segments on your onion, the base plate is what you need. So a bit of the base plate. So when you divide the bulb up, as long as you've got a bit of that base plate, there's a chance of creating a new bulbil. So we'll take a standard snowdrop and you can cut it into 16 pieces, which will take 3 years to flower, but you can bulk up your snowdrops much, much quicker. It's a really great horticultural technique. I know we talk about grafting and all these things that are sort of the wizardry of horticulture. I mean, I put chipping right up there with that.
I think you're absolutely right. I agree with that. But one thing that I find with that some people try to be too greedy with one bulb and chop it into too many pieces. And if you do that, you get weak growing bulbs. I had this with a snowdrop called walrus. I don't know whether you know walrus, but
I do the double. That's all. It's a bit crazy, yeah.
It's got the outers that are long like tusks that hang down. Well, I bought that. It's very disappointing. It failed to do much at all, really. And then somebody said to me, I bet whoever you got it from had twin scaled that and they've been too greedy with it. So I tried again from them. They said, well, I've got one that won't do that. Have this. And it's a different animal. I mean, it's so vigorous and it's lovely.
I think it depends as well on, it can often depend on the bulb that you start off with and how vigorous the plant is. There's various things that come into it. And I think the technique that we're not overly greedy with when we cut ours, I won't divide it in the larger bulbs into 16, something less. But the technique that Anne's developed is you put it in a vermiculite in a sealed container. So it's 9 parts vermiculite and 1 part water. And it's got to be sealed. And interestingly, I didn't have enough lids a few years ago, and there was a few pots that didn't have the sealed lid on, and they desiccated. So it's really important that you've got a minimal moisture content, but enough so that they don't desiccate. And then you'll find 4, 6, 8 weeks later that you can see almost like when you cut an onion and you've got a quarter and you've got the individual pieces, they sort of start to split and these little bulbs, these little bulbils emerge, and then you can grow them on. But it's it's a great horticultural technique, and it's a really fun thing to teach, and you can bulk up these expensive snowdrops.
I think it's a lovely thing for people to do because it's achievable, it's reasonably difficult, and it's a bit like growing bulbs from seed. If, for instance, say take Tulipa sprengeri, the last tulip flower, the lovely wild red flowered tulip. It's a beautiful thing. A lot of people balk at the thought of paying £5 for a bulb for a single bulb of this tulip. Now, that's what it is. But if you grow it from seed, once you've got a plant, if you save the seed and you grow it, between 3 and 5 years, you'll have your first flowers. Now, that seems an awful long time to wait. If you do it every year,
that's succession.
Yeah, it's a good thing.
Great tulip, by the way. Great tulip.
And there'll be loads more of them in the world now, because Alan did a fantastic video showing people how to do that, and it's been incredibly popular. And then we did a follow-up, I think 3 years on, with the same seed tray showing how the bulbs have grown. So we'll link to that so people can go and find out.
Yeah, quite an interesting point on. I was chatting. I think before last time I spoke to you, I actually went to Derry Watkins. I went to her garden. Then you've had her on the podcast, but. We got into a deep discussion about Tulipa sprengeri, and the true Tulipa sprengeri actually slightly stoloniferous. Yeah. And as well as seeding around, they will actually, they will produce stolons and they will run around, but they don't all do it. And a lot of the ones that you get from bulbs, from suppliers, they've got a slightly different genetic strain, and they aren't stoloniferous, and they will only set seed and spring around. So I think the true sprengeri is, from what I gather, is meant to be slightly stoloniferous, but I'm yet to get it to flower here.
It is slightly, but there's also a fact about tulips in general. I mean, some of the tulips, even those that are hybridized, they will produce what's called a dropper bulb. And that dropper bulb is produced from the old bulb, and it goes down lower. So if you go and dig your tulips up, quite often you think you've got them all, and you haven't, because there's some lurking a couple of inches below the surface of the other bulb. And they produce these dropper bulbs, which is a way of being stoloniferous. We tend to think of stolons as creeping under the ground horizontally, but they can actually just go straight down.
That's amazing. Fantastic. That's what this is all about. It's great to learn these little and picking up these little nuggets of information and every year, and it's it's just why gardening's so magical, isn't it?
Yeah. And I often think, I don't know whether I'm right or whether I'm wrong, but I often think if you've got a tulip that produces a dropper bulb, that's much more likely to become a permanent ingredient in your garden rather than fade away.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's interesting, something I've tried to do over the last couple of years is try to get, we've got good soil here for growing bulbs, it's sandy loam, but planting them deeper than we maybe would have done, get them as deep as we can. And then, on the bulb list, they are suggested some of the hybrid cultivars that do they are more perennial, and rather than replacing them every year, we're trying to get sort of colonies of the cultivars as well, or even just topping them up each year, so you might get slightly smaller bulbs of others, but just rather than ripping everything out and putting everything back in again,
you touched on something there, Ben, which I think is much more natural looking as well, because if tulip bulbs are left in the ground, you will get some that will go smaller, and therefore they produce slightly smaller flowers, which is a much more naturalistic look in the garden than it is to have everything like a boiled egg on a stick, isn't it?
Absolutely, yeah. Yeah, I think you've just got to play around. And the other things, I've lost a fair few, especially ones that we've bought more expensive ones for in pots and things. So always the species ones, and if you don't look after them right, they get left, they don't get watered for months or whatever, and at the wrong time, and we lose. Interesting, going back to the snowdrops, Rosemary Burnham, which we agreed last year that was our favourite one. I went to look at the pot the other day, and it's the only one we've lost. It's rotted, it's disappeared, it got too wet, and it's a lovely viridescent one. It's got the green outer markings, and it's gone. And it was our favourite snowdrop last year. It's not a cheap snowdrop, and it's rotted away. So goodbye, Rosemary. Hopefully we'll get another one somewhere. But yeah, it's all. Love you. We were all very sad. I had to text Jack to say we'd lost Rosemary.
So, what other snowdrops did you end up buying in your naughty Galanthus?
Well, I only bought the one Don Armstrong. My friend Anne gives us a lot of. So I bought Don Armstrong for my personal collection, but all the bulbs here are Yorkgate. So I've collected plants sort of as the garden, and they will stay with the garden no matter if I move on. And I've got one here actually. This is Franz Josef. I don't know if we can get the camera to do that. We'll see a picture of it anyway. But Franz Josef. The reason why I got Franz Josef is because of my travels in New Zealand. Franz Josef's an amazing place in New Zealand, and it's a lovely, lovely double, very dainty snowdrop. And I got Franz Josef just because of the nostalgia from my travels to New Zealand, and I think it's nice to link plants in with that nostalgia. And I will be fond of Franz Josef just because of my travels to New Zealand. So yeah, there's often no rhyme or reason why we collect plants, is there? But you can attach a bit of a story to it.
There's a great connection there, though, isn't there? I mean, I think that's what it's about. And I mean, you will always treasure plants that somebody's given you because you remember that person and you remember the conversations you had and you remember the good times you've had and everything else.
Exactly.
Yeah. So it's a personal thing. It's lovely.
I think that's how plants sort of tell stories. You walk around your garden and it's not only how beautiful it is, but it's all the stories that those plants tell you as well.
Yes.
Yeah, I think you're right. And the history of the garden evolves with every plant that comes in. And I'd take a plant as simple as Cortaderia richardii, which is a lovely plant they were just thinning it out yesterday, the old leaves and the old flower stems. But a chap brought it to Sybil back in, I think it was in the 70s, brought her it's New Zealand grass, but he was from America. And he brought her this little pot of Cortaderia richardii, and it was planted in the garden. And his daughter, about 30 years later, came to the garden and said, my mum gave, or my father gave this plant to Sybil. And it's huge, great. I mean, probably 4 foot at the base now, 7 foot, and then the flower spikes at sort of 8 foot. And what a lovely thing to visit somewhere across the other side of the world that your dad's given a plant and then you can come back and see it in all its glory in 30 years later. So, yeah, I mean, and these stories keep on coming up.
That's very strange because I first saw this Cortaderia richardii. I first saw it in the garden, an antique dealer many years ago. Went up to Scotland to go to a sale, an antique sale. And I kept seeing this pampas grass, and it was July, and this pampas grass had flowers on it, you see. And I kept thinking, well, what is this? Why don't we get flowers until September or October? And they got it up here. And then I found that instead of being Cortaderia, whatever it is, it's Cortaderia richardii, and it comes from New Zealand, where it's called the New Zealand toi, which is spelt Toe. And then when I later went to New Zealand, I saw it all over the place, and we've got it here, and it's seeded itself around in quite a few places as well. Sometimes it's convenient, sometimes less so, but I mean, it's put
absolutely
between stones in the desert, and you can leave the ones that are convenient, and it just looks perfect. It's wonderful, and it flowers in July. Yeah,
it's a good statement plant, and flowers in July. And as I say, we literally took out the flowered stems yesterday, so you know we're July through till February, and it keeps them.
Nasty old job, Ben, because it's very sharp, isn't it?
It is, yeah. I got the trainings to do it. I didn't do it myself.
Well, you got to start somewhere.
Yeah, no, they did a crack. In fact, it looks very good. It's interestingly, when Tom was extracting some of the leaves, he's created a bit of a horseshoe. It's built up in the middle. I think it's probably ready for a lift. It's almost growing about 30 centimeters off the ground, where they've sort of they've seeded themselves into the dying, the organic matter of what's been dropped before. So we actually took a few of the outer ones off and planted them in to try and create the space. But I'm reluctant. It's one of these plants that it's a great statement, and we'd have to really knock it back several years to rejuvenate it. So I'm going to give it another couple of years and then maybe do it then.
Yeah, if it ain't broke, don't fix it, Ben.
Yeah, exactly.
I realised the other day, seeing as I'm the person who has to do all the gardening, I mean, in my tiny garden, it's not like it's a big job, but I've become a real coward. I now shy away from plants that are too spiny and thorny. I just think, oh, they're beautiful. But I'm going to have to deal with that. And so I think I'll go for something else.
There are ways to deal with those plants, I mean, first of all, get yourself a good pair of gauntlets. But the other thing, I was just thinking when Ben was talking about Cortaderia richardii, how it builds up on itself. Sometimes what we do is we have something called a chrome in the garden. It's like a fork, and it's got the tines are bent down, if you see, like a big giant rake. And if you get one of those on a short handle and you drag it through like a comb, you can rake out all the nasty old dead bits from the middle of a clump of grasses. I wouldn't probably do it yet. I'd wait until the snow had gone, but wait until it's a bit more weather's a bit nicer to do that.
Yeah.
It's a great thing to do. And if you've got, people laugh at me when I say this, but you see these, some of these, like Carex, for instance, the one that looks like a brown wig that's blown off somebody's head when they haven't fixed it, laying there on the floor. It gets to be a bit of a tangled mess. If you can get a really wide toothed comb, like the kind of combs you use for going through horses and things like that. Curry combs, I suppose, are they? I don't know. What are they called?
Yeah.
But if you can get a long single row of teeth and you drag that through the grasses, you'd be amazed at how much dead detritus you pull out.
Yeah, it's quite amazing. Yeah, I was just thinking back then when you were saying about in your garden, Thordis, you've got the dream job now. You get to listen to plants people every week, and you must have an amazing dream plant list.
Oh, yeah. I think we should publish our Flomo list. I mean, literally. And then also the other side of it is collecting up pictures. And obviously I then get sidetracked because it's not just a straightforward thing of finding the photos I need. Someone like Jimmy Blake's Instagram.
That Googling.
I mean, Jimmy Blake's Instagram is just one long list of Flomo, same as Matt Pottage, same as you. So I'm just drowning in Flomo now.
Well, it's great that you're soaking up all these plants.
Now, before we started recording this podcast, you were running around gathering all kinds of exciting things for show and tell, Ben. So I'm desperate to see what you've gathered.
Right. Well, first of all, I did have more show and tell that was outside the back door. And yesterday was good weather and there was 4 inches of snow. So I had to ditch my first collection of show and tell. But I've got potentially even better plants. Opposite ends of the spectrum, some are tender and some are hardy, but I'm going to start with the biggie, and this is the rosette of Lobelia fistulosa, and I don't know if Alan's grown it before, but it's a Brazilian forest edge plant, and we grew it from. In fact, I'm just going to show you the size of pot. It's in like a 15-litre pot. So this was some seed got from Mike Clifford, and I've just looked at the seed list this morning, and we sowed the seed on the 10th of February last year. And I'm hoping, I'm going to put this in some big terracotta pots outside the cafe, and it flowers at 12, 15 foot. And it's the giant purple, I think I wrote it down the common name, giant purple lobelia. And it was Lobelia fistulosa, but whopping great spires. And you can get seed from Mike. I'll talk about Mike again in a minute because I've got a few seeds off him. But yeah, Lobelia fistulosa. So although it's taken we've grown it on for a year, I think it'll be worth it because I think we've got 7 plants of it, and they're going to be, fingers crossed, mammoth plants outside the cafe on the terrace.
I'll let you know, Ben, because I have got it, and
right.
Yeah, I grew it from seed again, came from Mike, and you see this thing, it's this giant rosette, and it just suddenly shoots up this huge spire of purple flowers. Mine is just starting its first flower bud. Now, whether it'll get to anything like 15 feet, I somehow don't think so, because it's in a pot which is about a metre across, I suppose.
Yeah.
So it's in a pretty big pot, but I too am going to put it outside. But it's just forming the flower bud. You can see the bud coming now, so I'm just hoping it will hang on till I can get it outside.
Yeah, a couple of hours have started producing buds, and we've sort of tried to hold them off.
Yeah,
flowering. So we'll see. So we've got them at a few at different stages, but. Yeah, well, we'll just have to see. I've never seen it flower. I mean, I hope it does.
Well, you've done better than me because you got 7, I got 1.
Well, hopefully it'll flower and we can send you some seed. But on that point, Mike Clifford, I actually was lucky enough to go to his garden in 2019. He has an amazing open day, and they propagate all sorts of plants for sale. And it all goes to charity when he opens his garden. But I mean, what a place. I mean, it's down in Poole in Dorset on the south coast. And he's got such a big collection of eucomis, aeoniums, he's got nepenthes, he's got bananas, and it's literally like a mini botanical garden around his bungalow. And it's just, he reminds me a lot of Jack who works here. Jack's a younger version of Mike, wearing flowery shirts and just an absolute plant wizard and just great with it. And a real good person to be around. He's really, really great. I've got another one from Mike. So this is Vasconcellea pubescens, which is mountain papaya. And look at that leaf, amazing leaf. So we grew this from seed last year, and we sowed it early last year, and we put it in some pots outside the additions. Some big tulip, we plant tulips in them, big vase-shaped pot that sort of stands at 2-3 feet, really deep, narrow pot. And that went in the centre, and then we put some soramatums around it. And really, really bonkers display, but the taproot on it reached right to the bottom of the pot. So it had a thick taproot on it that was 2 foot deep. So when we were knocking the pots out, Jack said, what the hell are we going to do with this? And because we can't pot it on, because we want to put it in plastic to pop it in the greenhouse for the winter. So we literally we cut the taproot off. And this is what it's fine. It didn't blink. So it's in about I think it's in a 5 litre pot, or a deep 3 litre pot. And it's done absolutely fine. And we're gonna put it in the ground this year, and potentially we're getting a new greenhouse that's slightly taller. That maybe, you never know, in a year or two, it'll fruit. But we're gonna grow it from seed again. Really cool plant. So yeah, if anybody fancies something a bit tropical in the garden, and even from the first year, it produces a really decent tropical leaf. So if you're looking for something in a pot in a courtyard garden, or even try it in the ground, I think mountain papaya Vasconcellea is one for you.
The most fascinating thing about that, Ben, is the way it produces its flowers and its fruits off the main stem.
Absolutely, they hug they're really tight to the stem.
Hence the reason to try and keep it growing under glass so that you can get some flowers and hopefully some fruit as well. I think, well, you've been to the garden, East Ruston, you know, we've got a pelly house, which is quite tall. We've got a paving slab, which is we took out in the middle to grow various things in it. Over the years, we've had a lemon tree. We've had jacaranda, which flowered and did very well. We had Dahlia imperialis, which flowered from October through till February, I suppose, probably, which did very well there. And I'm just thinking that this Vasconcellea, this mountain papaya, could be a lovely candidate for that, because if it's got the height in there, like your new greenhouse is going to have, I think I might have a little look, see if I can find a plant or two. If not, that'd be seed job, and we'll see if we can grow it here. And,
well, I'm sure we've got a spare plant.
That's
what you're angling for.
If there's any fruit, I'm coming down for it.
Okay.
Right then, I'll carry on. I don't know whether to show you the start. So actually, I've got a plant here, and I've got the start of the life cycle, and I've got the end of the life cycle. So I'll show you the start. This is a grostis, and it's like a little. I don't know if some of you might have grown panicum frost explosion, but it's a little annual grass that produced this lovely plume of flowers. I may have mentioned it on the last podcast. I can't remember, but I do an autumn sowing, and we'll do a spring sowing. So it's hardy. So I'll put this out in March, and I'm going to do another sowing this month. And you get these lovely little explosions of frothy flowers. And it was actually Andy, our trainee, that had selected it for his annual display last year, and I'd not seen it before. And the real highlight was calendula Indian summer was growing up through it, and this bright orange flower in this froth. And I'm going to show you now, because I have it in my living room. This is the flower head, and I've tied a bit of string around the base of it to keep it together. And I mean, it stays in my living room next to a lamp, like right through the winter. And some of the seeds have dropped around, but I mean, it's just gorgeous. And you can imagine what that looks like in the summer with calendula growing through it. And then you can save these seed heads and use it as a house decoration. So I use it
as a brush for cobwebs.
Yeah. I brought something else to do with seeds that I'll show you in a minute. But and this is a tiny plant I propagated from, and this is my favourite plant this time of year. And hopefully you can see it well. You see these. This is Cortaderia temura starts, which obviously this is a little offset that I've grown, and it's just coming up now. And if you get a mild winter, they start coming up in December. But we've had a fairly cold one in January. So, but this is a fantastic Cortaderia. As you can see, I mean, it literally is. They are milk chocolate. I think it's a terrible name, but yeah, chocolate stars. But Cortaderia is a great group of plants, and this is produce these plumes of, it's almost like feathery fern-like foliage until April time. Then they sort of fade, they start fading to green, they produce these purple flowers, which are almost...
It makes a huge mound, Ben, doesn't it? I mean, it doesn't stay like that tiny little thing in a pot. It makes a real mound about 2 foot tall, 60 centimetres tall.
It does. And I mean, we've got some great pictures of it in the garden, which I just want to show you with a little leaf close up. But yeah, you're right. It creates this real mound of chocolate froth. And people, what the hell is that? And we've got it in this lovely bed under this weeping birch, and there's aconites around it, there's snowdrops, there's cyclamen, there's the carex that you were talking about, and then later on other things come through. But this time of year, the bed looks amazing with all these sort of, and there's Helleborus foetidus in there as well, and you've got this absolute cacophony of plants in February, and it's just a great bed, and it just shows you what you can do this early in the year. But that's, for me, that's a must-have plant.
Yeah, agree with you.
What else have we got with me? I've got species daffodil. You may have seen it on my Instagram a few days ago.
I so wanted you to bring this. This is exquisite.
This, hopefully, you'll see the picture of it on, but it's a tiny. I mean, you can see it's about the size of my thumbnail of the flowers. But this is Narcissus assoanus, which species Narcissus for me are lovely. And there's a reason why these aren't as popular as snowdrops is because they're more difficult to grow, and because I think they were. I mean, I've just got it in my face now, and the smell is just really heady. And a lot of these species, Narcissi, a lot of them come from southern Spain. And when I was down there, the Tazetas, which a lot of them know as paper whites, there's the jonquil types, there's Remuxii, there's all these little daffodils that we'll see. And we'll see cultivars of them sold. You know, you get golden bells and you get, I'm trying to think the little one that I bought that was like this. But the true species for me, they're such underrated plants. And I've put quite a few of these in our Mediterranean sand garden as well. These are from Anne as well, from Anne Wright as a gift to the garden. And this is from the succulent house, but what a magical little plant.
That's absolutely fantastic. Now, they are typical of the kind of plants, if you save the seed, I mean, you can't buy them everywhere. They're quite scarce. But if you save the seed and you plant the seed and you grow it on 3 to 5 years, you'll have flowers of your own. And you know, that's a way to get more and more of them. It's lovely.
Yeah, and again, the twin scaling, if you can think. And then I've brought a bit of a wild card. This is a Lachenalia, which is a South African plant. Hopefully the glare of the sunshine, but these lovely drooping sort of tubular flowers and get these leaves. But he said when I brought it in, I seem to have destabilized it a little bit. But it was growing happily in the succulent house. But yeah, Lachenalia is just something to brighten up. We keep it frost free, the succulent house, and we just tried to add a few different bits of interest. Which obviously we've got the little Narcissi, and we've got these lovely Lachenalias and that's I'll read you the species Abidi. I can't say it. It's Abides. However you pronounce that.
If people want to buy Lachenalias, I think one of the nurseries that I know that actually sells some quite unusual ones is Jacques Armand.
Yeah.
And I know John, he goes by the name of John. I know him quite well. And he always says to me, when you're in London, just pop by and, you know, have a look and see what we got to offer. But he does have an enormous, I mean, he has this enormous network throughout the continent of people that grow for him. And they might grow one thing, they might grow 3 things. But that's how he's able in his catalogue to have odd little sections where he has Lachenalias like you're talking about there, but he perhaps has 7 different varieties, but might only have 10 of each. You see what I mean? So you do get the chance to buy them.
It's interesting you mentioned the continent, because I think with obviously the change in plant import rules for the bigger nursery, and we do import a few plants, and we've got our peach number of things that you need to import plants. But for some of the smaller nurseries where you have to pay a cost for every shipment for them to check, it's actually made things unaccessible for certainly people, the smaller group selling bulbs. So people like Jacquemon's are going to be fine, and they're going to be really a source where we can get our plants from. But it's going to, for a couple of years, it's going to make things a little bit more difficult for some of the rarer bits. And I think first of all, it'll rejuvenate the British nursery market. But it's very sad because it's a great thing to do is to plants with our friends on the continent as well as in the UK. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see how it develops. The plant world develops over the next decade, because I think it's going to change. It's going to change for the better and for the worse, depending on what's what.
Well, I think it will make a great deal of difference to what I call the hobby growers.
Yeah, of course,
because,
yeah.
You know, you quite often get people, they've got a small greenhouse, probably a heated greenhouse, and they're able to concentrate on something that they love. They will actually be able to find a market for some of the things that they produce, which is very good, I think. And it also keeps it in England where it should be, really. We should be able to get these things, not just from everywhere around the world, but from, you know, shop locally. That's what I'm trying to say, I think.
Yeah, you're right. I think, and it's interesting. So the way that I've brought something else. It's actually, I've brought my propagation list. I don't know if you can see it. I wanted to talk, because this applies to the everyday garden as well as a garden like us. And I've not always been organised. In fact, I'm traditionally very disorganised. But I'm starting to get into a rhythm now, and coming into my 4th season at Yorkgate. And what I've done is I create an Excel spreadsheet, and it's got things like the location for the garden, the number required, the month to sow. And actually, I've got a drop-down tab on the Excel spreadsheet, so I can just drop down February. and everything for February is on this list. There's 3 pages for sowing in February, but it means that we won't miss anything, and I can decide, and it stops me going a bit off piece in the middle of the season. So I've done the seed list for the whole year. There's pages and pages, and on the Excel spreadsheet I can drop it down, and these are all the seeds for February. So I just wanted to mention a few things on that. First thing that sticks out is Calceolaria mexicana. Lovely little sort of annual it's biennial, but it flowers first year from seed. Lovely bright yellow Calceolaria, and the dahlias from seed as well. I've got Australis seed, I've got Coccinia seed I collected myself, Valpalmarii seed, Merkii seed, and you get a whopping great plant. If you sow this early on, you've got a greenhouse to keep them going in. You know, come the end of the summer, you get a decent plant like you would from a tuber. There's different impatiens, there's some linarias, there's also the veg garden seeds on here. We've got lettuce speckled trout, there's Lola Beyonder, the salad green bowl, giant mustard, and we start sowing as early as this, and we sow into plugs and get them going in the greenhouse into modules, and we'll pop them out and put a bit of fleece of them so we can get a much earlier salad. So really, really useful tool is having a proper propagation list, and it's not something I've always done, but it's something I've managed to get my butt gear to do. But and then you can put whatever information you want on here, what it's going to be sown into, what it's going to be pricked out into, when it's got to go out in the garden. So you can dictate. This is the best way to get a really great garden, I think, is to be organised with a propagation list.
That is amazing. Though, I mean, that is a lot. 3 pages for February alone. How much space do you have? And do you, like, you know, the average gardener, have to sort of weigh up different things and think, oh, I'm not sure I've got space for that one?
I think we'll never have enough space. you grow whatever you can to the space that you've got. A lot of the seed on there is perennial, so one thing that we're getting into now is now we're getting to rhythms. The nursery will be going into its second year, but the passion for me since starting Yorkgate is to create a nursery where we can propagate everything ourselves. If we can't propagate it, we won't sell it. So we've got stock beds that are going in, but we've also got areas for lining out in the back. And part of that process, what we can't grow from seed will grow from cuttings, or will grow from division. So some of these things they'll get lined out, or they'll get pricked on, and they'll be for sale in 2022, which myself and Mark the nursery manager, is formulating the plan for the nursery, but we're working really hard together, and it's very, very complex to get everything. It's not growing the plant, it's getting it to the stage where it's not pot bound, or it's filled its pot and it's ready for the public, and every single species got to be looked at individually. It's going to take us 10 years to get to the point, but this is the start really of us growing from seed, and we're buying plants in that will be our stock plants, and we're sourcing from all the little nurseries like Alan mentioned, really great plants, and then we'll propagate from them. But it's going to take a few years to get going, and neither of us have worked in a commercial nursery before, so we're doing it a little bit of trial and error. But the amount of income we can generate for the garden and the charity by growing plants ourselves is just phenomenal. This sheet is not just plants of the garden, plants of the nursery. So yeah, so that's a little tangent, but
also the joy when a garden is open, and Alan will know this, anybody who opens their garden will know that people see something in the garden and then they want to buy it, which I'm sure is a problem for Alan when you grow such a range of stuff and you can't possibly have all of that in your plant sales area.
You get told off occasionally.
Yeah, well, exactly. And Matt Potters said on his podcast that they put in this variegated trachycarpus. Everybody goes to the plant sales area and wants to buy it, and it's incredibly hard to get hold of, so that's never going to be available.
The short answer is, Thordis, you can't, because I mean, Matt's got one because somebody very kindly donated it to Wisley through him, and so that's how he's got it. But until somebody actually gets off their backside and actually, physically gets it propagated, I think probably they might have to go to and do it scientifically. I mean, clone it, however they do it. But until that happens, it won't be in very, it won't be in wide. You just won't be able to get it.
Yeah, and I think we've got to be, we've got to be patient as gardeners. The plants that we savour the most. Go on.
There's one thing I know about you: you're not that patient.
Well, I'm patient with some things, not with others. Depends what the scale of patience is. Now, I'm not a patient person, but gardening actually has taught me patience. I think a little bit of. If I want something, I'll get it, of course. But I think, this thing about growing the plants on and growing them from seed, that requires, especially, we're talking about things like we're talking about growing glaucidiums for the nursery. They take 7 years to flower from seed, and we're going to give it a go. We might only have 20 plants for sale, but we want to be able to produce these little gems where the real plant people come and say, "Oh, I wanted that for years." And it might be £30, but we might have taken 7 years to grow it. It might be.
But it has to be. If you take, let's take peonies, for instance. If you sow a peony seed, for the first year you get nothing, because the first year it makes a root. It's only in the second year that it makes a shoot.
Absolutely.
And that's 2 years. So you've got to grow it probably for another 5 years to get it up to a flowering size plant. So that propagation period has to be paid for. If you want it, you have to pay for it.
And going full circle back to the snowdrops, that's why these snowdrops are so expensive. And I have lots of chats with Dan about it. And you think about something like, I don't know, one of the new inverse cuneiform, the Venus. 2 parent plants are selected. They're pollinated by hand and covered so that they don't get pollinated by anything else. So you've selected your parents. You have to collect the seed. You sow the seed collected from that plant, so you might get 40 seedlings. You have to grow them on for 3 years until they flower and select one that's different. You have to make sure it's stable for a year. Then you have to chop it up and propagate it, which then they take another 3 years. So it takes 10 years to create something amazing.
Golden Fleece actually took 18 years.
18 years. It was amazing.
18 years before there was enough to be saleable, and it had all the. Forget the propagation, but the other thing that you mentioned there, before people have trialed it enough to make sure that it is stable, to make sure that it's a good plant, and all the rest of it. You've got to allow for those things. Otherwise, people will come back and say, "Well, you didn't say it was going to die," or whatever. But in actual fact, Golden Fleece has turned out to be a nice snowdrop that does increase very well.
Yeah. No, I've never seen it in person. Looks like a great snowdrop.
You bring your sunglasses, Ben.
I'll be stealing it.
Brian Ellis, who has that Golden Fleece, should be on the podcast next week. And he'd said in normal times I would have been able to go to his garden, but I'm frightened of going to look at all the snowdrops in Brian's garden. It's bad enough going to Alan's, but we all know that Brian has got all of these amazing things, and I have vowed to not start collecting snowdrops until I have a bigger garden, because it's just a slippery slope. So I cannot even allow myself one. It's the most amount of self-restraint I think I've ever shown.
You can resist, but you'll fall for the trap.
You know how it starts, Thordis, between you and I. It takes a silly old fool like me to say, "Go on, Thordis, here you are. You have that one. You can find space for that."
Don't do it. Don't do it.
I think I promised you green tea, did I not?
Probably. Not green tea. Green tea, if there's anything that's going to get me, it's probably green tea.
Great. In fact, I follow a chap called Dean Croucher on Instagram, and he put a lovely picture on and a lovely post about green tea a few days ago, and it looks like a lovely snowdrop.
Yeah, it's really beautiful.
As I said, it's one that it doesn't stand out in the garden. It's a lovely snowdrop for the people that are really interested, galanthophores, to look at and to enjoy. But it's not a great showy plant. It's discreet, rather like yourself, Ben.
I don't know about that.
You know what? Actually, it's a seamless link from Dean into Flomo, because Dean is responsible for my Flomo. If someone's listening to this is the first time they've caught a Talking Dirty podcast, Flomo may be a term you don't know, but it'll be a feeling you're familiar with, because it's that FOMO you get, that fear of missing out about a plant, something you've seen on Instagram, which is what happened with me here, or a magazine, or, if you're lucky enough to be able to visit a garden in normal times in somebody's garden. And Dean R. Croucher, I think, or Croucher, on Instagram, well worth following, amazing plantsman. And he put up a photo, I think it was a wider shot, in which there was this fantastically vivid pink flower, and everybody commented on it. So then he put up a close-up saying, everyone wanted to know, what is this plant that he hadn't name checked in the post? And it was a Prunus, and I'm never going to be able to say it properly, but Prunus Beni-chidori.
Beni-chidori, yeah.
And I mean, it's
really an ornamental apricot.
It's got to be seen to be believed. I mean, the kind of, Alan's always known for describing things as sort of a shrieking chaparelli pink, but this is like a kind of, I mean, if they made a lipstick in this shade, I would buy it. It is just in your face, fantastically vivid.
Girl, it's bright.
Stop you in your tracks kind of pink. It just looked like a really lovely plant at this time of year when you need things to cheer you up. It just looked fantastic.
It is. I mean, an absolutely brilliant plant. I was speaking to Richard the other day from Sloten's Nurseries in Lincolnshire, who we buy an awful lot from, and he was talking about a new one of those Prunus that flowers now, which you can. I mean, they're scandent shrubs almost that you can grow as almost as a wall shrub, and they're jolly useful from that point of view. But yeah, because they're flowering when there's nothing. Well, I said nothing else around, as Ben has just quite rightly said. There is a lot around that's of interest, but you know, flowers growing against a wall are quite valuable.
Absolutely.
Ben, what's your FLOMO this week?
Do you know what? I'm not got much FLOMO this week. I think I'd like Rosemary Burnham back. I'd like Galanthus Rosemary Burnham back. I've not. It's interesting. I've had a bit of a down period with plants over Christmas. I've been sort of recentering myself and doing lots of exercise. So I've not been wondering too much about the plants. But I suppose from some of the things on my list here, aloe polyphylla, we've got some seed. In fact, we've got some seed to germinate. I was told to germinate them in water, and then to sow them once they'd start to put out a radicle. And it's worked. But I want to grow some big whopping aloe polyphyllas myself. Put them out in the garden. That's my
great plant.
That's my real FLOMO.
And they're really rare. Like, there really aren't that many of them about, are there? I don't know how long they take to start sort of forming that fantastic swirl.
And they don't all spiral. I mean, sometimes they don't get that really. I mean, you want that really tight Fibonacci spiral, don't you? Which is when they look the best.
You need to make it look as if it's been wound up.
Yeah, exactly that. Yeah.
Yeah. So grow as many as possible and hope that some of them do that.
Absolutely. What have you got, Alan?
Well, now I've been speaking to you, Ben. I mean, the list has grown. I have to say that the mountain papaya, Vasconcellea.
Vasconcellea, yeah.
Writing there. I'm going to get that to go in the Pelly house somehow or other. But my FLOMO that I had written down for this morning was a repeat flowering rambling rose, and I'd only discovered it yesterday. It's pink and it's repeat flowering. It was bred by Peter Beals, who's in Norfolk, Peter Beals Roses, and it's called Rural England. I'm reassured that it's a decent plant because it's got an AGM after it, which is the Award of Garden Merit, which is awarded by the Royal Horticultural Society. So it's obviously been grown and trialled. So I'm looking forward to growing that. I went around the garden yesterday with Ian, and I was looking at places where plants had sort of, shall we say, outlived their usefulness. We had an apricot that was pulled off the wall. It got too big and too tall. A mimosa, Acacia baeliana purpurea. It became a tree, and of course it blew right over the path, so we had to cut that back. And I suddenly get this tall wall, about, I don't know, 15, 18 feet tall, this piece of wall, over the entrance into a little building in our wall garden. And I thought, I had that Rambler Rose there. So it was a FLOMO until this morning when I ordered it from Peter Beals. I spoke to you.
Busy morning.
You just reminded me of something, actually. A bit of another sad plant loss. We've got an amazing Eucryphia nymonensis in sort of that's planted just outside the garden that you get a view from. And when we had the snow the other week, when we had the 8 inches, it started, the top of it splayed out. It's never done it before, but sort of bent out. And then the snow this morning, I think. Oh yeah. Off. I mean, it's a 20-foot tree, and the tips of the branches are touching the ground. I think it's been cut. It's been pruned at some point, and then it's reshooted. But it's going to need a severe. I don't think we've lost it, but it's going to need a real chop. It's going to need at least reducing by half. Which you just can't predict. You know, we've had wet, heavy snow.
Yeah. I was looking on Instagram yesterday and I saw the pink flowered form of that Eucryphia, and it's grown by a chap called John in North Norfolk, and he's been growing it. I think he grew it from seed originally, but it's now you can now buy it, and it was always thought of as being tender, and his is now 3 meters tall, so it's been growing for some time to get to that height.
Oh, it sounds
and
lovely.
it really does have pink flowers in August.
I mean, I don't know of any other late flowering trees like that that've got pink flowers.
No, most of the late flowering shrubs and trees are actually white flowered, aren't they?
Yeah, they are. Yeah.
Yeah.
Interesting.
So you've got all of this snow, Ben, waiting for you when we finish the podcast.
Yeah, I'm going to do a bit of seed sowing this afternoon, and yeah, I don't know. It was a bit unexpected. We had a good day's gardening yesterday. We've had a bit of a trouble that there's an old culvert that runs under the garden. So the old English for addle is bog. So there's lots of springs and bogs all over the local area, and there's various housing estates been built, and the bogs have been drained. But the original the route of the water comes through the garden, and Fred Spencer that designed the garden took into consideration these old culverts. So he fills the pond and it runs through into the duck pond and then the stream. And it's very clever how it fits with the garden. But somebody has reported that there was this string in the walls being caused an issue, which is, as long as I've been here, it's very boggy grass, and we'd actually put a gunner in by the side of a outside the garden. Jack had done a bit of guerrilla gardening, but anyway, they've come with a bigger and they've taken it out and they've broken up the old culvert. So I don't know how it's going to change the garden. So it actually flooded our pond. So we were decluttering the pond yesterday. So we don't know what effects it'll have when they've changed the waterworks, but it might change the structure of the way the water runs through the garden. So fingers crossed it doesn't. But we were cleaning up around the pond and cutting things back, and we cleared out the Cortaderia richardii, and real good productive day. And then we've had the snow again overnight, so back to square one.
Typical England, no 2 days are alike.
That's why we love it though.
Well, go tuck yourself up somewhere warm for a wonderful bit of seed sowing.
Well, thank you for having me back on. It's been a pleasure again.
Oh, it's a treat.
Thank you.
Oh, such a list of plants we all want now, Ben, thanks to you.
There's one thing about Ben Preston is that he will keep you poor.
Well, that's you as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I keep myself poor as well, though.
Yeah.
Well, nice to see you both, and hopefully I'll see you soon.
Yeah, lovely to see you.
Ben.
Happy gardening.
Bye-bye.
You all right there?
I've got papaya. I've got mountain papaya. Oh, I forgot. I'll just text Jack to bring it up.
You can stay there. You quite happy there? Okay, fine. So bye, Ben. I'll get you back in a second. You can see we've got lovely sunshine for some reason. It's just
shut up. Sorry. Oh.
You're right there.
Yes.
Do you need some water? I'm not quite sure I can get it to you.
That's all right. Thank God you can't, because you'd probably throw it over me.
Would I?